Welcome to MovieFile's 100 movies in 100 days. So yeah, we've got a very special treat for you today in a rather obscure Swedish film. It was recommended by a gentleman on my Facebook page called Paul Robert Rank. He's a friend of a friend of a friend, of course. It was written and directed by a gentleman named Ingmar Bergman. He's described as the Woody Allen of Sweden, taking his trait to stage, television, and also film. It's a film known as The Seventh Seal. The film tells the journey of a medieval knight who plays a game of chess with Death. The knight is played by Max von Sydow. Death, who is played by Ben Eckler. Now the story is Death has come to take the knight's life, but the knight himself decides to challenge Death to a game of chess. That's quite a weird thing to say to Death, isn't it? Just like, hey, tell you what, don't take my life. We're going to play a game of chess that lasts probably the span of 3 to 4 days, and then see if I actually win. And if I win, I get to continue my miserable life. But if you win, you get to, you know, take my soul. How about it? Oh, you're going to do it anyway. Okay, that doesn't make a film. Bergman developed the film from his own screenplay, of course, called Wood Painting, which was set on the stage. The term The Seventh Seal is actually taken from the Book of Revelations, and it's a passage that's used at the beginning of the film and also at the end. If you guys want to check out what Revelation was, it's Revelation 8.1, and it refers to the motif of silence, which means the silence of God or the absence of God. That's pretty much the theme of this movie. And a lot of scenes from this film are actually they are now being paid homage to and actually used a lot as parodies. He's actually seen as a very well-renowned director in terms of this film because it was a stepping stone for Bert. And the fun thing about this is that nobody else in this movie sees Death. Nobody apart from one other fella, but we can go into that. Block and his friend Johns, they head for Block's castle. He was the other guy that sort of like washed up on the beach, laying there lifeless. And they pass some actors. And the great thing about this is that each scene transitions. So as soon as they pass someone, it transitions onto the next set of people. So it tells rather stories within story. And the most, you know, this is kind of ambiguous the way they do it, but in movies like, you know, I Love New York, for example, I can't believe I said that, they do the same thing. They tell stories within stories, and you know, it's been referred to a lot in like Simpsons episodes as well, and you can see people paying homage to this sort of style in other movies. Pulp Fiction's another example. So as soon as they pass, you see Joff wake up from a deep sleep next to his wife Maria and their agent, who's lying there next to them for some reason. Seriously, these guys have like no homes. Well, it was the Black Death, so everyone's been driven out of their homes by rapists and killers. So Joff comes out and he's like yawning and stuff, and he goes to have himself a drink of water and just relax. And next minute he sees like a woman, a beautiful woman who has like a tiara. She looks like something out of a Disney princess movie. She's walking with this little child, so he goes back in and he goes to tell his wife. They have a conversation about their lives and how they're doing things, and the fact that they're travelling actors and they want their son to be this little acrobat, which is really just this little thing who's a naked baby with his butt hanging out, running about and crawling about everywhere. And as their story sort of fades into the next scene, where you see the knight and his friend basically go into a church. I think the knight's actually doing it for confession. Now what the knight does, as he goes into confessional, he speaks to someone in a robe that you think is a monk, but is actually Death. And he talks about the absence of God and why God, you know, allows these things to happen to people. And as he talks about it, he wants to at least do one meaningful deed, one thing that, you know, keeps his life going. It gives his life meaning for everything that he's done, for the, you know, the people he's killed, for the wars that he's fought in, for the crusades that he's been a part of, which is a pretty good thing. I think we all want to do that when we're at death's door. We want to think about one thing that makes us remembered, one thing that sets us apart from everybody else. Then as he comes out of the church with his friend, he speaks to a young woman who's been basically, they're throwing stones at her, they're throwing rat piss and all this nasty stuff to get the devil away from her, because apparently the devil doesn't like smells. I can just see it now.
Oh, that's disgusting. So I'm not gonna create havoc today because there's feces on the floor.
And you know, that sets him up. They claim this woman has spoken to the devil, so the knight talks to her and tries to find out from her if, you know, the devil is around, if he could talk to him and find out why all this is happening. His friend asks him to leave, so they decide to go, and she starts screaming. You hear these nasty screams, these deafening screams in the background. He goes to see somewhere where he can basically get himself a drink of water, because the guy's thirsty. You would be in this sort of time, you know, so thirsty you probably want to kill someone. And you want to like smack a bitch.
Just been wanting to smack a bitch.
And then he saves a servant girl from being raped by a guy just to try and do the same thing himself. Then he asks the girl if she can actually, you know, be his servant woman who could cook for him and clean for him. Now, this scene, after the conversation happens and they leave, the three of them go riding off, and then we go into the acting troupe again of John, Mia, and also their agent, whose name is Scat. He introduces the troupe, and they persist to throw like apples and oranges at this guy because he's shit. And the troupe begin to sing a song and do sort of like a little theatrical play. Now, as Mia and John are doing their thing, the agent gets enticed by this woman by the name of Lisa into running off with her. Now, for all intents and purposes, she's the blacksmith's wife, who again looks like a homeless person. They continue to do their thing, and then they're interrupted by the Flagelliants, I think they're called. They basically are holding a cross up and, you know, start singing this song and throwing around this thing that has burning sort of nasty incense in it, talking about the plague and the fact they're all just going to die. So, you know, practically ruining the party.
The whole evening is ruined. Why are you saying it like that? Say what? I'm just pointing out the party's ruined. You know what? I'm not going to get sucked into this.
And it's a funny thing, you know, these guys, they get off and whipping themselves and, you know, saying that they're unclean and etc. So that's what you do. Nothing wrong with a little bit of hardcore S&M. Now, then the scene sort of cuts into another where Joff is having a drink. He's sitting there at a public house, basically just trying to soak his tears away of the very bad performance that was being interrupted. And then bumps into Raval. Raval forces him to act like a bear. He looks like he's going to collapse as everybody else is basically humiliating him, treating him like crap. The blacksmith goes up to him and starts pushing him about, saying that it was an actor that looked like him that left with his wife, and you know, they were just it wasn't a good time to be an actor anyway in that day and age, and he got freaking destroyed for it. Do you need assistance? Then John appears in the same house to take this gentleman away, and then finds Raval and says to him, "Look, I said I was going to cut you in the face before, so I'm going to cut you, bitch." Cuts his face. Guy stands there holding his face, screaming. The knight runs into his wife Mia, and they basically are sitting down and talking, and he's just basically talking to her about what he's doing, and she tells him about her story being an actress and all, and as the little baby just goes running around. Joff comes back and then talks about his experience in the house. He's drunk out of his head. Mia decides, you know what, I'm gonna rest on me, husband, it's fine. As they talk over the situation, because obviously you get drunk and you go home, pretty much like husbands at this day and age. Now the night block decides to go and get these guys to come with him to his castle, ask them if they want to ride the whole Black Death out there because it's going into the east, and they decide to do that, so they all get up and they all make their way. Now along the way they run into Scat and Lisa, who basically are roaming through the forest. She's unsatisfied by him because he doesn't know how to pleasure a woman. Imagine not knowing how to pleasure a woman. That's just that's just really bad. So she's dissatisfied. Her husband comes in and starts having a war of words with both her and Scat, and he's trying to defend her. And John decides to get involved in the situation, feeding words to the blacksmith, who then just says to his wife she can have him, he doesn't care anymore, you know, he'll get the divorce papers, and she runs back to him like, "Hey, my husband, I love you." See, I don't really see, they must not have had options, either the dirty man or the fat man. She's really just, yeah. And there's a funny little scene where Scat basically tries to kill himself, pretends to kill himself. As the blacksmith and his wife leave, he climbs a tree for the night where everybody wants to go home and head to the castle. The form of Death, who was playing chess with Block, decides that he's going to cut that tree down and end Scat's life because, you know, it's his time. They pass that condemned young woman again, and Block tries to get her to make the devil appear in front of him, and she says that she can see him. He does that, I think, because he wants to know if everything he believes in is real, and it's quite a big thing in this film. And the notion of God, the notion of death, and the notion of the devil. What's good, what's evil. They've done some nasty things in the name of God, and he wants to see what the devil has to say, why this plague is going on, and why he's doing these things to people. The only thing that's kind of tangible in this movie that you know is not fixatious, which is not a figment of this man's mind, is death, because death is always there playing chess, he's playing games. It's literally sort of a struggle between you. He then gives the girl some herbs to take away her pain because he wants her to basically die in peace. Raval, who's he's kind of like the villain of this movie, he comes round and he tells him that he has the plague and that he's in pain and he wants help. The servant girl tries to give him some water to sort of help him out, and John tells her no, that you don't need to do that, there's no point, he's dying, just let him die. And that's pretty much what it is. The guy pretty much dies for his sins. The knight then is playing, it cuts to a little scene with the knight playing chess. It's all dark, and Joff tells his wife that he can see him playing chess with Death and that they should leave, and they should leave now. After Death basically clocks on what's going to happen, he basically says that no one is going to leave him, that no one escapes death. Block, the knight, decides to scatter his pieces onto the floor and says that he doesn't know where, which piece goes where. Death decides to put the board back in his favour and then checkmates the knight. Death wins the game, as you know from the next move. So he then announces that he's going to be claiming the life of the knight and anyone who's with him. And before they leave, he asks Block if he's accomplished his one meaningful deed. And Block says he has. The scene then cuts to the knight heading on towards the castle, as we also then see Joff and his wife going through the storm, trying to ride it out, as he says that this is a fragment of death, that death is doing this. The knight is then reunited with his wife, who's the sole occupant of the castle, and because the servants have gone, everyone's fled due to the Black Plague. They have their last supper, and he quotes the passage from the Seventh Seal. He then asks if anybody has actually appeared before the front of the house, and John says no. Death then makes his way through, and the wife welcomes him to the house. He then prays to God for all their sins and that he would spare any one of them. And then John says there's no point now into having anybody pray to anyone over this. And imagine what he says. He's like, have mercy on us because we are small, we are frightened, and we are ignorant. Think about that for a second. Small, frightened, and ignorant. And that's a lot of how this film is viewed, because it's the whole ignorance of people, the ignorance of how this has happened, the fact there's no scientific value in this, the whole absence of God, the whole issue with the devil and how they believed the best way was to beat the devil basically by rumour, and how they felt that death was all around them, that no one was going to survive this. But we do have a happy ending. As the rest of them are taken by death, the family sits out the storm, all happy as the sun's shining. Mia and Joff, they watch their son play, and then the next morning Joff sees the knight and his followers being taken away, and they're being led away in the solemn dance of death. So let's talk about the acting now. Max von Sydow, who's Block, the knight in this movie, it's been assumed that he's the knight from the Crusades, and he's come back and he's figured out that the Crusades are worthless. Everything he's done is worthless. He's killed people in the name of God, and someone who's absent in the whole process of the Black Plague. This thing has hit everybody, it's damning them, it's killing everyone, and he believed that he was doing stuff in God's name for a just and right reason. He starts to doubt himself, and you can see his emotions, the way he conveys, the way he speaks his lines, the way the character is. He's supposed to be a strong figure as a knight, but he's also rather withered, very starved. He's got practically no muscle in his face. You can see the bones, and this is how his character is. He conveys the emotion. He conveys the sense of worthlessness that this knight has. It's a very big job, and a very big job which I feel that he's conveyed rather well. This is a time, remember, where they don't rely so much on actors being given like loads of makeup and green screen and having loads of like fireworks and showy effects to hold the movie down. A lot of this had to be held by actors, and he, being the lead in this movie, has he's conveyed a lot, you know, and done his job rather well. Now, another star in this is Benk Eggert, the guy whose death he's not seen so often, but he's given that notion. He's rather creepy. The way he talks, the way he acts in this movie shows that he's someone who's omnipotent, but yet also someone who could be led astray with a good game. He's a very fun character to play, I'd say, but he's not necessarily the lead villain in this. I would say he's the sort of bridge between these characters and the theme of this movie. Now, Gunnar Bjornstad, the guy who's John's the manservant, he's a very different. He's rather sort of an enigma in this because of the way his character is portrayed. One minute he's being portrayed as a bumbling fool, and next he's a rather strong and a type of barbarish character because he likes to take what he wants but sees no reason or rhyme to do so. Effective actor, he was okay in regards to his roles, but his scenes never held me in terms to my attention. I used to zone out a lot when I used to see it. Now let's talk about Niles Pope Joff. He was a character that sees visions. He was an actor, very quirky and very bumbling as well at the same time. He was used sort of as a foil in this movie, where you could see his premonitions, you can understand what this guy was on about, but you could also see exactly how he was kind of gullible at the same time. But being a gullible fool didn't stop him from being like this father figure as well. And it's a funny thing, and it's a conversation I had with my friend Anthony Mango about this, where usually in a lot of television, a lot of film, the father is always seen as the bumbling fool. He's the guy that's usually the weaker person out of the family. And Joff is pretty much portrayed as that. He's weak. He's just one of these guys who's lost hope. He's happy with what he has. He doesn't care about anything else apart from his little family, his own little piece of life. And again, he was someone that was rather interesting, a rather interesting character to play. But because of the way that this was resonated from him, it was like the Shakespearean fool rather easily, and he helped sort of like link his side of the story together and showed where he sort of fitted in. And let's talk about Bertil Anderberg, the guy who played Raval. He was really the classic sort of villain character, got his just desserts at the end by succumbing to the Black Death, and also he was the guy who wanted to rape. He didn't care about anything anymore. He didn't understand what rhyme and reason. He was the kind of opposite of Joff's character. You know, as Joff was the fool, he was the cancerous villain of the lot, and he conveyed that a lot with his face, with the way he talked, the way he pronounced himself. It was very big and disgusting type person, and you really loathed him. He was a very good character to play, and someone that you could see easily hate in this movie, and in terms of what he got in the end, there was no sympathy. And let's talk about the theme before we end this. The theme pretty much was God versus life versus death versus sort of like the devil. People wanted to understand why these things were happening and why God's absence made this happen, and it was conveyed in such a way that it gave you that thought. I love films like this as well because it can make you think exactly about these religious aspects. I know you atheists out there don't see this as anything logical, but in a sense it did bring out that whole religious debate about sort of life versus death and God's ways and why God would do certain things, which helped the movie totally, you know. Now let's go to the score. Now, as you know, I rate movies between 1 and 5. 1 being totally shit, never watch this again, and 5 being awesome, you need to go and see this movie. Now, I give this movie a 4. Now, the reason I gave this movie a 4 is it's something rather interesting, and it's a thinking man's movie. It leaves you looking at all these questions and trying to answer them in your own sort of way. It's a lot like how theatre does, you know, political theatre and also religious theatre, how they allow you to think about certain issues and try and answer these questions in your head when you leave the theatre. If you want to see this movie, I suggest you can buy the special edition Blu-ray. It's one of those things where if you like Swedish movies, you'll love this film. If you like religious films like Ben-Hur and stuff like that, I think you would love this movie as well. But if you're interested in sort of boom boom flashy over the top Michael Bay type films, I don't think this will be the film for you. So tomorrow's MovieFile, I will be doing The Wrestler. It's a classic with Mickey Rourke, and also was the film that allowed a resurgence in his career. So stay tuned for that, and I will see you tomorrow. And as always, guys, leave a comment, like, and also subscribe to this channel if you want to see more MovieFile. And remember, we're only in day 3 of 100 days, so I'll see you then.